Yes, guys. So let's start. Let's begin with the second guideline. And these are literally, if it will not be wrong to say that these are the, carry forward thing from the yesterday only. Okay. These are the continuation of the yesterday's guidelines only. Okay. So without wasting much time, let me share the screen. Let me share the PPTs. Today I prepared the PPTs also. Okay. I was reading those guidelines and I was preparing the PPTs, and you won't believe these guidelines are really fantastic. I mean, the amazing guidelines. This today's guidelines, what we are going to discuss, are amazing. I mean, the entire clinical trial process has been covered here. Entire clinical trial process. A lot of new and interesting things you even don't know. Okay. So, guys, today we are going to talk about the national ethical guidelines for biomedical and health research involving human participants. Okay. So why I did not remove this title? You must be, wondered. This title, was studied yesterday, not today. But the second guidelines are the continuation of these guidelines only. The new drug and clinical trial rules 2019, and the next guidelines, what we are going to study today, National Ethical Guidelines for Biomedical and Health Research involving human participant 2017, are the continuation of these only. Don't look at the year, because these are Schedule Y. You know that. Don't forget. This is Schedule Y from the Drugs and Cosmetic Act 1945. So we already had the clinical trial guidelines, and in extension to that, they created these new guidelines called National Ethical Guidelines for Biomedical and Health Research involving human participant 2017. And in 2019, they just, got these out of the Drugs and Cosmetic Act, nothing else. Okay, they just got these things out of Drugs and Cosmetic Act, nothing else. Okay, so those we have discussed yesterday. Today we are going to discuss the module 2, that is National Ethical Guidelines for Biomedical and Health Research involving human participant 2017. So again, there are some questions to all of you guys. My first question is the same question I asked yesterday. How many of you have read the National Ethical Guidelines for Biomedical and Health Research involving human participants? Today, we don't have 300 or 200 people in the class, because yesterday this class was free for everyone. Today's class is not free for everyone, because this is for the paid people, right? And my interns only, right? This class is for interns and my, the paid people only. So yeah, still I can see we have crossed a lot of numbers here. Yes, guys. So please write how many of you have read the National Ethical Guidelines for Biomedical and Health Research involving human participants. Yes. Yes, guys. No, no one. Is it? Yesterday, many people were there who has read the NDCT 2019. Yes, guys. Okay. Okay. Then no problem. Let me ask you the next question then. I mean, it's a waste of the, I think, question. It's a waste of the question. If I'm asking you, give me two major glimpses of national ethical guidelines for biomedical and health research involving human participants. Then, what is payment to trial participants? What is CTRI? Why do we need it? These are the part of these guidelines only. So, I mean, if anyone wants to comment on what is the payment to trial participant, can tell me by their, if they have read somewhere or if they know anything about payment to the trial participant. Okay, payment to the trial participant. What is this? Okay, can someone tell me what is the payment to the trial participant? Yes. What is the payment? As per their transport allowance. Okay. 5K approx. 2K to 5K. I'm not asking the amount. I'm asking what is the payment? What is the term payment to the clinical trial participant? What does it mean exactly? and that's nowhere from 2 to 5K. Okay, that completely depends on the people. That completely depends on the person and their conditions. Okay. Yes. Tell me. Efforts. What kind of efforts? Mm, Nazia is telling payment means giving some kind of benefits, either transport allowance or some monetary benefits to get the participant to join the study as a clinical trial. So, this sentence sounds like you are bribing the participant. Okay, you are bribing the participants some monetary benefits. Not at all. No monetary benefits. Okay. These are no monetary benefits. Okay. There are no monetary benefits sounds like this. Okay. So there are something different. Payments are something different. Work. Economical background of the participants. No payment giving to trial participants for participating in a study. Mm, taking consent. Taking consent by paying them. Imtiaz Bhagwan. They, the DCGI will send the entire team of the local thana, and they will arrest us. Okay, if we tell that we are paying money to take the consent. Okay, if we are telling that we are charging, I mean, we are giving the money to the participant for taking their consent, we will be in the jail tomorrow. Okay, not at all. So the trial participant payment is something. See, I'll give you some scenarios. When the patient comes to the hospital, okay, and that is eligible for our study, and we ask him or her to participate in a study. So what we do is we just take care of some things. Okay, we just take care of some things like their travel, usually their travel, and then sometimes their food and their daily allowances. Okay, three things. First thing is their travel. I'm sorry. Word size not working. Yeah. First thing is majorly their travel allowance. Okay. And travel allowance is not according to like how they are traveling and all. Travel allowances are calculated in prior means before the clinical trial initiation only. That is calculated like how like suppose from the trial participants will come from 100 kilometer. Okay, so how much we have to give them? 500 rupees for travel, or 1000 rupees for 1000 INR for the travel as a travel allowance, then plus 200 for their food allowances. And like suppose maybe 500 for their daily allowances, if it is given by the sponsor. Sometimes the sponsor give only travel allowances, sometimes travel plus food, sometimes travel plus food plus daily, not daily expenses. It completely depends on the person's occupation, what they are doing. If they are like suppose if they are daily wage workers, then it would be 500 rupees for a day. Okay, when the person is coming to coming to the visit or coming for the trial participation anytime, so they will get some money. Okay, so it completely depends. There is no bribe, there is no offering, there is nothing like we are giving for the consent or anything else. Not at all. These things are very crucial and very important and very very confidential. Okay, very very confidential as well. And these things cannot be given. Remember, again, I'm stating that these things cannot be given as a bribe or offering to any patient against the consent. Okay, against the consent, not at all. Okay. So understand payment to the trial participant. What is payment to the trial participants? This is not exactly like we cannot say this is for the participation. This is like we are not what we say, we are not attracting them by this money. We are just supporting them. Times we hold the expenses. I mean, we just give them the expenses of their medicines, their tests and all, right? So those are different part. Those are different part. Okay. Now, next question is what is CTRI? What is CTRI, guys? Anyone know that what is CTRI? Can someone tell me what is CTRI? Yes, can someone tell me what is CTRI? Yes, guys. Yes. Anyone who knows CTRI? What is CTRI? Yes. Hmm. Clinical Trial Registry of India. That is the form. That is the full form. Clinical Trial Registry of India is full form. Okay, it helps you help us see the trials that are going on in India. That are going on in India. Hmm. Why do we need it? Need it? Why do we need it? Before performing the clinical trial, the proper registry is required to maintain the record of ongoing CT trial updates. Okay. Why do we need CTRI? So CTRI is Clinical Trial Registry of India. Okay, CTRI is Clinical Trial Registry of India, as you have written here. And it is now, guys, it is, I will, I have the specific, slide for that. I have the specific chapter on the CTRI here, like where I'll tell why we need and what are the rules says for the CTRI. So CTRI is the registry, Clinical Trial Registry of India, where all the clinical trials or clinical studies, whether those are observational studies, those are, the interventional clinical trials, those are experimental clinical trials, case control cohort, any type of study, whatever are being done for the healthcare and medical research must be registered to the CTRI portal. Okay, must be registered to the CTRI portal. Why? To keep the records, and the government wants to know whatever is being done accordingly and wherever in India, whatever is being done. So that is very, very important, right? Yeah, definitely. So we can say that to ensure no trial is going on without official approval, because you have to upload the ethical approval also there, right? You have to upload the ethical approval also there, and yes, definitely it is required for, like, to keep the records, like how many clinical trials and what type of clinical trials are going on, right? So this is the open access portal, means like if you keep like what's going on, it will come from the, like you have, can someone tell me what is the international clinical trial database? What is the international clinical data, clinical trial database against, like, CTRI? CTRI is for India. Do you know anything which is worldwide or international? Can someone tell me? Yes, guys, can someone tell me? Yes. WHO. Okay, no. Anyone else? No idea. No idea, seriously. International Clinical Trial Registry Platform, ICTRP. Okay, ICTRP. Okay, multi-country trial are recorded how? Yes, I'll tell you. Yes, guys. Yes. Anyone else? No. Okay. So have you ever heard of clinicaltrials.gov? Yes, Prab. Yes. So clinicaltrials.gov. Okay. Clinical trials.gov. That is from NIH, National Institute of Health. National Institute of Health also is the, portal, nih.gov, but clinicaltrials.gov comes under the NIH only, National Institute of Health. Okay, clinicaltrials.gov is one of the biggest, okay, one of the biggest registry for the international clinical trials. Even my registry, which was multicentric, multinational, was registered at clinicaltrials.gov. Okay, so yes, clinicaltrials.gov is one of the major website, and ICTRP is there, International Clinical Trial Registry Platform is there. So there are multiple platforms, but majorly clinicaltrials.com is there internationally, and in India we have CTRI. Okay, so how many principles for the researchers are there in this guidelines? In today's guidelines, what we are going to study, there are 12. Let's see. We'll study later. Okay. You don't know because you have not read. So what are the general principles? First thing is, what are the general principles of researchers? General principles of researchers involving human participant under these guidelines. Under these guidelines. So first is principle of essentiality, principle of voluntariness, principle of non-exploitation, principle of social responsibility, principle of ensuring privacy and confidentiality, principle of risk minimization, and then principle of professional competence, principle of maximization of benefit, principle of institutional arrangements, principle of transparency and accountability, principle of totality of responsibility, principle of environmental protection. So these are the 12 principles, guys. These are the 12 principles. So why these principles are important? Because the entire guidelines what we are studying today, the ethical guidelines for biomedical research involving the human participant, why it is important, why we need to know about these principles, because the entire guidelines are based on these principles only. First is principle of essentiality. Can someone tell me what is the essentiality means and what is the principle of essentiality? Yes, guys. These are the simple terms. Essentiality. Can someone tell me what is the essentiality means here? Essentiality means you must do the clinical trial only when it is required. You should involve human participant only if it is required and if it is for social needs, social essentiality. Okay. You should not do the clinical trials involving human beings without the need. Of course, without the need, you should not do it. You should have the proper, essentiality, or we say the importance, or the the need to the society. Without essentiality or without need, we should not conduct the clinical trials. Understand? Then principle of voluntariness. So voluntariness, you all know that clinical trial participants are always you know sorry guys, got someone on the door. It's okay. Yeah. So the voluntariness means like when the person or the participant participating into the clinical trial, that should be completely volunteer approach. Okay. They should not be forced to participate into the clinical trial. Okay. These are the major and important principles you should remember. The participant can get into the clinical trial like when you are approaching them according to eligibility criteria, according to inclusion and exclusion criteria. Okay, see, so whenever you are conducting a clinical trial, recruit the participant based on the inclusion and exclusion criteria, right? And give them the consent form and take the informed consent, and you give them the patient information sheet, inform them about everything about risk compensation and everything whatever is required, right? That is you are doing, you are paying them even sometimes for the travel and all, right? But exit from the clinical trial is 100% on the participant. Even they can leave the clinical trial without a justification, without telling a justification. They can leave the clinical trial even in between any time. Okay, that is 100% their choice, 100% their mood. You cannot restrict them. It is 100% voluntarily. So voluntarily means even when you are recruiting them to the clinical trial, that time also it is completely their choice. If they say no, you cannot recruit them into the clinical trial. Understand? You cannot recruit them into the clinical trial, and they can exit anytime whenever they want. So that is called as principle of voluntariness, right? Then principle of non-exploitation. So principle of non-exploitation is means like they should not be exploited. Okay, they should not be given anything which risks their life or which harms their life. If you know that, if the according to the bias or according to their financial conditions, according to their socioeconomical status, you should not just do the clinical trial as the Nazis did. as the Nazis did, or the lot of other clinical trials were done forcefully, the forcefully, the thalidomide, not thalidomide clinical trial. There was for antibiotic clinical trial in Canada, right? And then these Nazis clinical trials and a lot of clinical trials. Sometimes, our researchers, what they do, what they think is there are poor people, they don't know anything, and get them into the clinical trial, and they give a lot of nonsense medicines, and they do the clinical trials on them without, telling them everything, without informing them everything. So if you really think that you are hiding something from the participant, you are not telling them something, the participant, which they must know, you should not recruit them. Okay, so the principle number 3 says the non-exploitation of participant and researcher must respect it. Okay, then principle of social responsibility. Of course, there are social responsibilities from the researcher side, like the confidentiality, integrity of the participant of the clinical trial, right? And then ensuring again the privacy and confidentiality. Then there must be very minimal risk or no risk whenever you are recruiting any patient or any participant into the clinical trial. Okay, any participant into the clinical trial. I think then no one would allow them to be the part of clinical trial. I think then no one would allow them to be the part of clinical trial. I didn't understand that what you are trying to say. Please write it clearly. Okay, then principle of professional competence. So again, I have, there are the researchers, who are not competent to handle the human participants. They are not, competent to prepare the informed consent forms. They're not competent to prepare the principal, the brochures, all the brochures and the patient information sheets, and they don't give all the information, and they're not able to handle the side effects, or if certain concerns come in between the clinical trial. So the professional competence is very, very important. The trainings and all type of trainings, and following the GCP, good clinical practices, are very important in the clinical trials when it comes to the researcher, right? So the 7th principle says about professional competence of the researcher. Then again, maximization of the benefit means the positive outcomes, not the we should always look, as a researcher, we should always look for the maximum benefit out of the clinical trial. If we are hiring or recruiting any human participants, and we are so we should always look for that. And then institutional arrangements means always all the research institutions should have all the resources, and they should support their researchers, and they should support their human participants also. They should have the ethical committee, they should monitor the research, they should follow the guidelines, and everything they have to arrange those part. Institutional arrangement means comes like the whatever the resources and whatever things are required from the institution, as to conduct any kind of research. And then principle of transparency and accountability. So if we allow the participant to know about the clinical trial, I think they would not allow the trials should be on them. No, not at all. Why they will not? You should know how to tell them, what information have to tell them. Like all the information should convey to them, but they should be, we should make them aware. If we should make them aware about the benefits and the benefit of the society out of this clinical trial. Many people, I think no one has said no to me till date in 5 clinical trials and 5 phase 2 and 5 phase 3 clinical trials. You just should know that what to tell and how to tell. Okay, you should know that how to tell, how to convince them. Convince them means you should not tell them lie. Okay, you should not tell them lie, or you should not, play with them in the clinical trials. You should tell them the truth, but you should tell them with the honesty, like whatever the outcomes are, are there of the research, right? So they will definitely come out of that. Okay, then principle of transparency and accountability, like about the data, whatever you are providing to the, maybe CTRI or whatever you are providing in the research, whatever research you are doing, it must be transparent, and the researchers or the principal investigator must be accountable to all of that. Okay, they must be accountable to all of that. Then principle of totality of the responsibility. Definitely the researchers are totally responsible for that. So you should account, I mean, you should divide the responsibilities again in your team, and the head of the team, like a director of the clinical trial or director of the research or the principal investigator, will be the total responsible person for all these things. Then principle of environmental protection. Again, it is very important, very, very important. you know This is your wrong perception, Kumar. If we directly tell about the honestly about the clinical trial, they will not allow. No, 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 no. Everyone will allow. People know that what are clinical trials. I think you are new to this part. People know about the clinical trials. What are clinical trials? What are the clinical trials? And also, people voluntarily participate. Some I have seen the people for the COVID vaccination. I have seen the people who came across the states to participate in the clinical trials by themselves without the invitation, without asking anything. So they know the cause, they know the importance of the clinical trials. So no one says no, or it is not like that no one will be allowed. Everyone comes to the clinical trials. You don't know when the patients are there in the critical conditions and all. When we tell them that this could be benefit to you, if not to you, then maybe the society can use such drugs in the future. So everyone understand the situations, and they come forward to participate in the clinical trials. Okay, so principle of environmental protection, why it is? Because when we do the phase 3, phase 2 clinical trials, lot of traces, lot of chemicals, lot of medicines are being thrown, lot of human biologics are being thrown. So we have to be very careful, and we have to make proper arrangements for the spoilation of the environment from those kind of medicines, those kind of syringes, those kind of procedures, procedural parts, those kind of biologics, right? So principle of environmental protection is again very, very important. So these guidelines, what we are going to study today, are focusing on these clinical these principles, the general principles. And now we can start with the things. So general ethical concerns. What are the general ethical concerns? First of all, risk and harms, privacy and confidentiality, distributive justice, payment of participants' interest, selection of vulnerable and special groups, and the community engagement. And the 10th number is post-research access and benefit sharing. Okay, so these are the common ethical and general concerns in any clinical research. Okay, in any clinical research or clinical trials, right? So we have to, when these guidelines says and talks about all these general issues and general ethical concerns. So I'll not talk about everything, because many of you have already learned, and we are going to even learn in the next slide. So I want to ask some questions actually. Can someone tell me what does it mean by ancillary care? What does it mean by ancillary care? Can someone from my audience tell me what is ancillary care? Yes, guys. Ancillary care. Don't look in the Google. You have to tell me. If you know, tell me. If you don't know, please write, I don't know. That's fine for me. Yes, guys. Ancillary care. What is ancillary care? Yes. Anyone? No one knows ancillary care? At least write. We don't know. Yes, guys. Okay. 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 Fine. 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 Not emergency. See, so ancillary care is something. Let me give you a background. Suppose you are doing a clinical trial, right? You are doing a clinical trial, and patient gets the permanent damage, permanent harm, right? Permanent harm or permanent disability, right? Or maybe the death. What they get? What they get? They get compensation. They get compensation, monetary compensation, right? Monetary benefits, directly monetary compensations they get. Correct? They get monetary compensations. But if they get some temporary harm where there is no need of monetary support, but they need the treatment, medicines, all the care, and that is covered by clinical trial or sponsor, right? That is covered by clinical trial or sponsor. There is no monetary benefits given to the patient or participant here. Okay, when the damage is temporary, like maybe the extension of hospitalization, giving some extra medicines. So, the expenditure of that treatment or the treatment itself or that whatever care given additionally to cure the temporary harm or the temporary injury which has happened to the participant is called as ancillary care. Okay, ancillary care means where there are no monetary benefits given to the participant, but all the treatment cost and the treatment and care are taken care by the sponsor or clinical trial site or investigator, whatever. I mean, it's usually taken care by the sponsor. So whatever, wherever the compensation or the monetary benefits are not given to the patient or participant, but all the care is given to the patient or participant by the sponsor from the clinical trial side, that is called as ancillary care. Understand? That is called as ancillary care, right? Now, this is the one thing. Can someone tell me? I'll ask you some random questions here. Can someone see, about risks and harms, about privacy and confidentiality, payment of the participant, I just told, compensation we discussed yesterday, ancillary care now, conflict of interest I discussed yesterday, I'll discuss more. Then the one more thing here is distributive justice. Can someone tell me what is distributive justice and why it is a general ethical concern? Yes, guys. Ancillary care, you understood now. What is distributive justice? Can anyone tell me distributive justice? In the guidelines, there are terms, and those are the major terms, major ethical concerns in these guidelines. Yes, guys, distributive justice. Yes. So let's not ask you what is distributive justice. Okay. What is distributive justice? Yes. Justice in the sense of medical treatment provided to pay all the patients irrespective of social status. That is a Google answer for something like that is not for the clinical trial. Clinical trial perspective, distributive justice comes at two places. First at recruitment. Okay, first at recruitment, second at the participation. So at the recruitment means you should not discriminate any patient, whether those are vulnerable, non-vulnerable, whatever the things are, you should not. So you should not be discriminatory with any patient, okay, or with any participant. If you need the patients, you should not be discriminatory if it based on their social, the social status, based on the travel, based on their conditions, based on the whatever the things you know you can discriminate the people on, right? You should not be discriminatory based on anything, based on their status, based on their disease, based on their nature of the disease, anything. You should not be discriminatory while recruitment. You should be completely unbiased. You should be completely unbiased during the recruitment and during the participation, treatment, or if they need any kind of help, compensation, you should not be discriminatory. So distributed justice means you should be you know equally, you should be treating equally all your participants in the clinical trial. Okay, you should give them the equal treatments. Who gets from, see, nobody gets nothing from the clinical trial, anything, not at all. See, principal investigators, they don't get the money. Okay, usually the people who are working in the clinical trial, they get the money. Working on the clinical trial means the research associates, research assistants, research coordinators, and all, right? But principal investigators do not get the money. Participants do not get the money. Just travel, food, or maybe their daily allowances. That's all. Only for the day when they are coming to the hospital. Or if they get some injuries, maybe the treatment part, maybe some medicines. That's all. They don't get anything from the trials. Trials are for the ethics and morality. Okay, morality and ethics, and it is for the social support. Okay, it is for the social support, for the treatment and enhancements and treatment developments. That's why no one gets benefit out of these except sponsors sometimes, because sponsors are, again, sponsors are spending a lot of money, as I told. At least, for a minimal, 100 site clinical trial, they usually pay $300 million for a clinical trial. You know, just for 100 sites, 100 hospitals, they pay $300 million money. And the money does not come to any person. Money goes in the transportation, money goes in the documentation, fees, and the medicines and all the resources whatever they give to the research, right? So money goes there. So distributive justice, I hope you understand. Selection of vulnerable population, I'm going to cover in the slides. Community engagement means public health. Whenever you don't need the research in 1 or 2%, you just need the research in you need to get the entire public or entire group of the people, or the entire society or entire village maybe sometimes, to the clinical trial. So that time you have to conduct such trials in the community. So those are called as community engagement, when you don't need the single person from a community. You need many people to know the maybe the what we say, the prevalence or incidences of any disease, or maybe the treatment pattern or social habits or food habits from the community. You want to know everything from that community. So in such clinical trials or in such studies, you need the community, not 1%, 2%, or 100 people, but the entire community. So those are called as community engagement. Post-research access means the publications and all. And benefit sharing is credit sharing. Okay, credit sharing, the participation credit sharing in the publications, in the the publications, books, thesis, or whatever credits are given, like the university credits and all. So those credits must be distributed in all. So post trial credits must be distributed perfectly and correctly, right? So these are the major ethical concerns in these guidelines. These are risks. So let's talk about the harms and risk. Okay, harms and risk. I told you about yesterday to read about the harms, right? But I think you have not read. Let me tell you about the harms. So there are 5 levels of harms. Okay, these are not the simple, harms I'm telling. These are taken from HAMEC. HAMEC is nothing but harm associated to medical errors. Medical errors or medicinal errors. Okay, medical error, medicinal errors. Classification. Classification, right? So harm is nothing but this HAMAC is a guideline. Okay, HAMAC is the guideline, and the classification for harms associated to medicinal error classification. Okay, this is HAMAC is harm associated to medical errors classification, right? So they have classified the harms or the risk to happen. Okay, risk is when the harm has not happened, and harm is whenever the event has happened. Understand? So risk and harms have the same number of levels and same number of references. So 0 is like no harm. No or no potential for the patient harm, or any changes in patient monitoring level or length of care required. I mean, the error happened here. The error because of the medicine has happened here, but there is no hospitalization or the extension of hospitalization required. That comes under the no harm, simply no risk. So any medicine which has no potential for the patient to risk or to change in the monitoring when giving, or to change the length of the hospitalization and all, is minor harm. Minor harm is when the potential for minor non-life threatening temporary harm that may or may not require any efforts. Okay, any kind of efforts, they're not required at all. Okay, so length of stay may be required, but it would be less than 1 day, or it may not have any kind of the problem. Now my voice is okay or not, guys? Please let me know if my voice is okay or not. Okay, maybe don't mind. I mean, I don't know. I mind it. Is it still breaking? Oh, कर देंगे. Is it still breaking? Okay, let me know if there are some more network problems. Sometime you let me know. Okay. So the minor harm is again when the length of stay maybe less than, for 1 hour, 2 hours, or 3 hours is required. Maybe just the, just the visit. Okay, just the visit to the hospital, just seeing the patient, seeing the doctor, and but there is no major harm out of that. There is no major harm out of that, right? So no life threatening temporary harm is happening due to the medicine. Then second is level 2 is moderate. There are potential for minor life threatening temporary harm that would require any efforts. Okay, here the efforts are required. In the previous two type of harms, there was no even efforts were required. Okay, but here they need some kind of monitoring. Okay, maybe monitoring of the patient for some time, maybe some tests like liver function test, or the hemoglobin test, or kidney function test, or some kind of ECG, ECG echo or something is required. Just the monitoring and a very low level change in the patient level of care. Maybe the patient needs to be in the daycare, but again for sometimes like 6 7 hours, 8 hours, or maybe less than 1 day. So only the efforts are required which are at very low level. Okay, again, this is non-life threatening temporary harms. Okay, when it comes to the level 3 serious, there was the potential for major but non-life threatening. Here the harm is major but non-life threatening, and here it may need some kind of administration of antidote, emergency care, and the length of care might be expected to be more than 1 day. Okay, length of care might be expected to have more than 1 day, right? 1 day. Then severe is almost like life threatening or mortal harm, like it could be like life threatening, mortal harm. And here the length of stay is definitely substantially increased more than 1 day. And here it may be a need of antidote or transfer to the intensive care, or ECMO or something. Okay, ECMO or something, you need the ECMO. Okay, who is the brave man here who will tell me the full form of ECMO? Tell me the full form of ECMO. Abhi. Who will tell me the full form of ECMO? ECMO. And why it is required? Guys, tell me, you are from pharmacy, pharmacy and all. Can you please tell me what is the full form of ECMO? What is ECMO? Don't see in the Google. Without seeing in the Google, if you're telling me, then it would be great. Okay, it would be great if you're telling me what is ECMO. Okay, if you're telling me the ECMO thing, you will be knowing the things. Okay, tell me what is the IAS. So Gina, have you seen in the Google or without Google only? Have you seen in the Google or without Google only? Tell me. And that needs when the person do not have this is kind of external support. This is a kind of external support for breathing and for the pumping of heart. Okay, this is the extra support, the outside support for that. Okay, my voice is breaking, and why it is happening today? My voice, what happened to my voice? I'm not sure, guys. Oh, can is everyone facing this problem with my voice, guys? Oh, oh, what to do? Yeah, my networks are not properly, I believe. The networks are okay, but I don't know what's going on. Yeah, you can try speaking after turning off the camera. Okay, you want me to turn off the camera? You don't like my face, guys? Okay, fine. Okay, fine, guys, fine. Maybe I don't know how to do the speed check and all, but it's okay. Okay, fine. I got to know that. Okay, fine, guys. Let me see. I know, Mohit, you guys don't like my face. It's perfectly fine. Hmm. Okay. Fine. Array, I'm just kidding. Fine. I know I'm beautiful and handsome. Okay. That's okay. That's the secondary part. Let's come back to the harms. Okay. So how many of you understood the harms, guys? And any query in the harms? Please tell me if any queries related to the harms. Do you understand how many levels? There are 5 levels, 0 to 4. 0 is no harm. 0 is no harm, then minor, moderate, severe, and serious and severe. So there is even the differences in the severe and serious. So serious, you don't need in the serious, you don't need any kind of ECMO or any transfer to the intensive care or any kind of intensive support, intensive life support you don't need in the serious harm. Okay, but in the severe harm you need all those. You can read the HAMEC classification. HAMEC classification, if you read, that will be helping you in understanding the risks and harms of related to the medicines. And the same thing we pursue in the clinical trials. When we give the clinical trials, we pursue the same thing. Okay. Now, guys, next thing is let's go to the next part, which is very important. Now, I hope my voice is clear. My voice is clear now. Okay, so next thing is responsible conduct of research. This is the major part. This is the major part of these clinical trial guidelines. Okay, not clinical trial guidelines. These like the guidelines for the national guidelines for what? National guidelines for the biomedical research, ethical biomedical research. Okay, involving the human participants. So till now, we were just learning the basics, but now we'll come to the responsible conduct of the research. See, yesterday we studied what? Yesterday we studied about the ethics committee. We studied about the regulations. So I have a $1 million question. I'll not give you the $1 million, but I'm giving you some surprise, what we say, the surprise rewards. But the question I will ask in the end of this presentation or end of this class. Okay, I will ask that question in the end of this class. So you all have to be very much aware what I'm teaching now. And the question will be depending on that. Okay, you will be get a surprise, reward for that. You will get a surprise reward for that question, right? And so let's read, let's study, and let's discuss the things. And that question I'll ask at the end of this presentation, today's presentation. So responsible conduct of the research is our major part of these guidelines, right? So in this first thing, what they've discussed is about about COI. What is COI, guys? What is COI? Conflict of interest. COI is nothing but the conflict of interest. Okay, conflict of interest. Interest. Okay, COI is conflict of interest. So first thing what they talked about here is conflict of interest, and that is the major issue in all the clinical trials. And about when we talk about the principal investigator, when we talk about the researchers, when we talk about the professors, when we talk any kind of ethical committee member or anyone, any stakeholder, if we are talking about, we must talk about the the conflict of interest. So what exactly the conflict of interest is and what we should know that. So let me tell you first what is conflict of interest. Yesterday we have talked about the conflict of interest a little bit, but today let me tell you. So any person who is the stakeholder, any person who is the stakeholder in the clinical trials or the clinical research, any person in the clinical research, like maybe the researchers or maybe the principal investigator or investigator, co-investigator, or the research associate or the professor or the team, no one must be involved. Okay, no one must be involved with the company, in such manners where they are getting the monetary benefits or they are getting any kind of benefit which can influence the result or the conduction of the current project. Understand? Little big sentence to understand, but let me, let me tell you in the, fragments. First, suppose there is a person A. Let's see, he's the, teammate. He's the teammate. He's the co-investigator. He is the co-investigator. Guys, listen to me carefully. He's the co-investigator, and our trial is funded from Novartis. Novartis is the pharmaceutical company. Novartis is supporting the clinical trial on some drug B. Okay, some drug X. Okay, this drug X is for, suppose, rheumatoid arthritis. Okay, listen to this. This is very important. Rheumatoid arthritis. Okay, they are making a drug. I mean, the clinical trial is on the X drug X, and that, I mean, sponsor is Novartis. Novartis is sponsor. Sorry, sponsor. Okay, Novartis is sponsor. Drug is X. Rheumatoid arthritis is the indication, and the co-investigator is A. There is a team of investigators and the researchers and all. But A is also associated with Novartis. How? A is taking some educational sessions, educational sessions for Novartis teams. Okay. Novartis teams as an external resource person. A is taking some classes to the Novartis teams, Novartis, suppose medical representatives and all, as an external resource person and charging something 20,000 per class. The A is charging from Novartis. A is charging 20,000, for one class from Novartis. And now A is the principal, I mean, the co-investigator in X clinical trial. I mean, the clinical trial for drug X. So he should, what the A should do is, A should declare all his connections with Novartis. Okay. A should declare all the connections with Novartis, however he is connecting. Okay, he is connected, however. He should declare that I am the external resource person with Novartis and I am charging this much amount for these many sessions or whatever sessions. And the major statement here is this will not be affecting the conduction of the research. This will not be affecting the conduction of the research on drug X, and this will not be affecting the results of clinical trial being done for X. Understand? That is the confidence, I mean, that is the conflict of interest declaration. Okay, that is called as confidence, conflict of interest declaration. And this is a conflict of interest, right? This is a conflict of interest, right? If the A is not resolving it, or A is not telling anybody, or A is not declaring about it, that is called as conflict of interest and failure to conflict of interest. And in such cases, he should be terminated from the clinical trial, or he should not be a part of clinical trial. You understand? That is called as conflict of interest. That's how the things are there. Another scenario is, suppose A is not the external resource person, but A is not the resource person, but what else can be? See, A is already working with Novartis on the another clinical trial for drug S, and he has the 10 crore rupees funds. Okay, he has the 10 crore rupees funds for the clinical trial S from the Novartis itself, which started 2 years back, right? And now A is working on the X. So he should declare, I am already connected with Novartis. I'm already conducting one clinical trial with Novartis of 10 crore rupees. This is the clinical trial. This is the number of clinical trial. But participation in that clinical trial or the fundings of that clinical trial will not influence the result of the current clinical trial, or will not influence the conduction of the current clinical trial. Understand, guys? That is conflict of interest. Two scenarios I told you. Number three scenario. Suppose A is professor and co-investigator for X. Then the third scenario here could be what? Can you imagine the third scenario here? The third scenario, let me tell you the third scenario. Third scenario is here. B is the wife of A. Wife of A is B, right? And B is also the professor, right? B is not directly associated with the clinical trial of X. B is not directly associated with the clinical trial X, but B separately working with Novartis and doing a clinical trial on drug, suppose O, right? Drug O. And C has landed almost, I mean, not landed, C has the funds of almost, again, 2 crores from Novartis for the clinical trial O, right? So the A also has to declare the connection of B with Novartis. Understand? A also has to declare the connection of B with the Novartis. Okay. Because B is directly associated with A. B is the wife of A. So A has to declare the connection of B also with the Novartis. Like my wife is associated with a Novartis and she is already working on a clinical trial O with the funding of 2 crores, and that is not going to affect the conduction of current clinical trial, and that is not going to affect the results of the current clinical trial. Understand? That is confidence, I mean the conflict of interest. That is the conflict of interest, and that is the declaration of conflict of interest. I hope you understand the conflict of interest here. Now, how to identify, mitigate, and manage the conflict of interest. So can one principal investigator work in clinical trials of 2 drugs which are not affecting each other? Other once it is declared. No, if you are associated with such drugs or such one company or one sponsor, you have to declare it. You have to declare it. Okay, you have to declare it. Right, you have to declare it. Just declare that I am connected with the this agency like this. So that's enough. And you can tell that this is not going to influence, because sometimes the companies, what they do is they involve you in one clinical trial for 1 crore, and they will give you the 5 crore for the next clinical trial, and they ask you to give the benefit of doubt sometimes if there is not in the clinical trials. That's how they capture the market. That's how they capture the investigators. So these guidelines are for that only. These guidelines are prepared for that only. So research institute must develop the policies. Research institutes must develop the policies and standard operations procedures to address the COI issues that are dynamic, transparent, and actively actively communicated. Then they should implement those policies and procedures to address the conflict of interest. Guys, you're right. My networks are not that great. I think I logged out in between only. I'm so sorry. Where we were actually, tell me where we were, guys. Let me share the screen again. Yes, let me know where we were. Is it the correct slide? Just let me know. Is it the correct slide where we were? Okay. Yes, sir. No, sir. What you guys are telling? Are you here with me or not? Check the stable speed. I'll check later. I don't want to disturb it in between. Okay. Yeah. So the institutions, I was talking about the institutions, should mitigate and manage the conflict of interests. Okay. I mean, this is about the institutions, ethical conduct. Yeah. Research institutions must develop the policies, must, implement the policies, and must monitor the research to check the results, and they should not interfere in the making of ethics committee. Okay. Then for researchers must ensure that they document all submitted, to the ethics committee, including the disclosure of COI. If the researcher is associated in such conflict of interest, they should disclose it financially or non-financially. If they are associated, they should get it documented and submit it to ethics committee. So right, they should submit it to the ethics committee. Okay, they should guard against the conflict of commitment that may arise from situations that place competing the demands of researchers, time and loyalties, right? So it should be, safeguarding them. If you are, displaying or disclosing the conflict of interest, during the research, that will always help you. That will always, help you. That will always safeguard you and your loyalties towards the research and research institution. Okay. And that will prevent the intellectual and personal conflicts by ensuring that they do not serve as reviewer for the grants or publications submitted by close colleges, relatives, or students. As I was telling, all the relatives and all that, all the connections must be, disclosed. Okay. And for the ethics committee, they must evaluate each study in light of any kind of disclosed conflict of interest. If there is any conflict of interest, the ethics committee's duty is to check those conflict of interests and verify those ethics, verify those conflict of interest. Verify those conflict of interests. Okay. And this the ethics committee must be aware of the members to disclose their own COIs first, right? And then they should go for the the team meeting, and the people who are involved in the reviewing and decision making on the protocols, that they should not be involved in such such commitments with any kind of sponsor or any kind of company which can influence the results of the current study or current clinical trial, right? So now again the CTRI. So I was talking about the CTRI. These guidelines have specific terms for the CTRI, registration with CTRI. So here, look at these three things, guys. Very, very important. So the clinical trial registry India linked to WHO registry was launched on 20th July 2007 by Indian Council of Medical Research. Okay, as a free and online public record system for registration of clinical trials. Okay, for the PG theses and other biomedical research. So remember, all the PG and PhD thesis also must be recorded to CTRI, whether those are PharmD, MPharm, or anything MD, DM thesis, PhD thesis. Those all must be registered in the Clinical Trial Registry of India. Understand? That is mandatory. Now I'll come to that why. So the CTRI was developed in 2007 by ICMR. Now, look at this. The trial registration in CTRI was made mandatory by CDSCO on 15th June 2019 for clinical trials that are registered under the Drugs and Cosmetic Act and rules. Okay. So all the clinical trials must be registered into CTRI. According to 64th World Medical Association General Assembly. Okay. According to 64th World Medical Association General Assembly, held in Brazil in October 2013, the Declaration of Helsinki clearly states that every research study involving human being subject must be registered in a publicly accessible database before recruitment of the first subject. So before recruitment of any person, it should be registered in the clinical trial registry. India has own clinical trial registry. So any kind of study which is involving the human beings, okay, whether the retrospective, prospective, cross-sectional, cohort, clinical trials, randomized controlled clinical trials, anything, you must be registered in the CTRI. Okay. So 2007 it was launched. In 2019 they made all the clinical trials to be mandatorily registered, and from 2013 everything which is involving the human subjects must be registered. Okay, from 2013, everything which is involving the human beings must be registered in the CTRI. Okay, that is very, very important. Okay, guys, ethics committee roles and responsibility. We understood yesterday. We understood yesterday itself. So first is autonomy, justice, beneficence, and non-malfunctions, confidentiality, and all. So these things we have, studied yesterday. These things we have discussed yesterday. These things we have studied yesterday, so I'm not wasting much time here. Next is data acquisition, management, sharing, and owning the data. Okay, so Data for the following types of research cannot be collected without getting prior authorization. Okay, remember that. The data for following types of research cannot be collected without getting the prior authorization from EC or the specific concerned committees. Okay, specific concerned committees. First is human participants or animals in the research. Okay, you cannot start collecting any type of data on the human participants or in animals in any kind of research without prior approval from the ethics committee. Any information posted on some website you cannot take without the prior permission. If you are involving in the clinical research or any kind of research, any kind of such information must be taken from the taken with the permission. Like we take the permission for taking any kind of pictures, photos from the clinical registries or the research papers and all. So it must be getting with the prior authorization, because when we go to the ethics committee or something and we are using any kind of picture which has been published before, they ask for the permission. They ask for the permission or credits. Okay, any kind of hazardous material or biological agent, we should take the prior authorization. Biological sample storage and future testing, it must be having the prior authorization from the ethics committee or the institution or the authorities. Okay, those are very, very important. Understand, guys? Those are very, very important. And then information from some libraries, databases, and archives, it must be taken with permission, right? Published photograph or any other published information must be taken with the approval. And then other copyrighted and patented process or material must be taken with prior authorization, right? So these are the guidelines what says about the data acquisition, data management, data sharing, right? Reporting and criteria for authorship. Someone was asking what should be the authorship for, what should be the authorship, right? What should be the authorship when we publish the paper? So this is the post clinical trial. When we publish the paper, what exactly must be there? What exactly must be there? So according to ICMJE, guys, focus. ICMJE is international committee, international committee for, I don't know, for or of medical journal editors. Okay, this is the committee of medical journal editors, and these are the guidelines used everywhere. These are the guidelines used everywhere, ICMGE guidelines, and they have the clear criteria for authorship. Who can be the author, who cannot be the author. Okay, who can be the author, who cannot be the author. So, first of all, the person who has the substantial contribution to the conception and design of the work, or the acquisition, analysis, or interpretation of the data of the work can be the author. Okay, these should be the criterias. If you have participated in conception, like concepting the research, initiation of the research, planning of the research, and design of the work, and any kind of acquisition, data acquisition, analysis, or interpretation of the data for the work, you can be the author. If you are not participating substantially in this part, you cannot be the author. Then you should be involved at least in drafting the work or revising it for important intellectual content, right? The thesis writing or the paper writing, you should be involved in that, either drafting or revising or proofreading. Okay, then you should give the final, if you are involved in the final approval of any version to be published, you can be the author, right? So these are the inclusion criteria for to be the author, right? So agreement must be there to be accountable for all aspect of the work and ensuring the questions related to the accuracy or integrity of any part of the work appropriately investigator and resolve. So that means all the authors are equally responsible. All the authors are equally responsible for the data which has been published, whether that is correct or that is not correct. Okay, that must be there. Okay, so you understood the criteria. Now what it does not say, what must not be there, right? What must not be there? See, people sometimes it is, in the institutions, it is must to have, guys, listen very carefully. It is must to have the HOD's name. It is must to have the guide's name. Okay, it is, I mean, guides is important. It is must to have the all members of the department or your friend's name in that. If they have not participated in that, they are not the authors. Okay, so for that you must have heard of ghost authorship. Ghost authorship means the person's name is there in the authorship, the person's name is there in the paper, but he has no idea about the paper. He is not even aware of that name. He is not even aware of that paper. It's just because of the friendship, just because of the, it's the author's friend or something. You are, I mean, his name or her name is there. So that is called as ghost authorship. Okay. And then guest authorship. Guest authorship, forced authorship. Like forced authorship means sometimes HOD, whether he's participated in the clinical trial or not, his name must be there. Guest means friend's authorship. If it is your friend something and he just, helped you in proofreading or something and you kept his name, or without even doing something, you kept his name because he's your roommate or he's your classmate, that is guest or friend's authorship, right? That kind of authorships are, that kind of authorships are illegal. That kind of authorships are illegal according to ICJME. So if the person wants to be the author, in any publication, he must follow these criteria. He must follow these criteria. Otherwise, legally, they are not, they are not, they cannot be the author in the paper, right? Now, there is the trial misconduct, right? There are the research misconducts. Can someone tell me one example of research misconduct, guys? Can someone just tell me one example of research misconduct and what is research misconduct? See, today's guidelines are little long, but it's okay. We'll finish in half an hour. I mean, we'll finish it by 8:30 maximum. Yes, types of research misconduct, guys. Can someone tell me about types of research misconduct? Yes, guys. Tell me any type of research misconduct. Yes. Looking for the answers. Plagiarism. Plagiarism. Yes, plagiarism. Okay, only plagiarism. Fabrication of the data. Yes, perfectly fine. False data, fabrication of data. Along with it. Okay. What is that? Yes, guys. Tell me more. Okay. So, research misconducts are many types. First is fabrication. First is fabrication of the data. Fabrication of the data means making up the data or making up the results or the recording or the reporting, of that data. First of all, you are intentionally making up the data, false data, making up the false data just to show the positive results. Okay, sometimes you do not do the research, but you have to submit the thesis. So you make up the entire data. Okay, you make up the entire data. So that is the research misconduct, and you can go to jail. Literally, you can go to jail for that. Okay, you can go to jail for that. Fabrication of the data. Second thing is fabrication and then falsification or manipulation. Falsification of the data, fabrication of the data, falsification of the data. So falsification is manipulating the research material, equipments, process, or changing or suppressing the data or results without scientific or statistical justifications. Means fabrication means you are completely making up the data, but falsification means whatever the data you got, if it is negative, you are making it positive. Okay, you are changing the data. Whatever research results you got, you are not satisfied with them, so you are changing that to be positive. Okay, so that is called as falsification, creating the false data or changing the original data into false data. Understand? That is called as falsification. So my question to all of you is, why fabrication and falsification must not be done? Okay, what are the consequences? I'm asking you all, what are the consequences of falsification? Yes, guys, what are the consequences of falsification? Can someone tell me what could be the consequences of falsification? Yes, guys. Can someone tell me what could be the consequences of falsification? Come on, guys, right? I'm asking consequences. You guys are not coming to the consequences. No point in conducting research, no authentic scientific evidence, wrong information leading to harm to the participant if the research is on the new drug. Yes. So here I can see something, some very important. See, not unreliable results, but consequences are directly associated. See, guys, consequences are directly associated with harm. Okay, harm may not be with the participant because you are changing the results after research, but it may change. You know what? It may affect the guidelines, entire guidelines for treatment. Okay, it may affect the entire guidelines for treatment. If you are changing the negative results into the positive, like suppose the drug A, the clinical trial was conducted for the drug A, and the results were not favoring the result A. I mean, drugs results were not favoring the efficacy of drug A. Okay, but just because of the falsification, I mean, just you wanted to show the positive results, you showed the effectiveness that this drug A is effective in any disease like rheumatic arthritis, suppose. Okay. And guidelines picked your paper and they made the guidelines like drug A is helpful in rheumatic arthritis, rheumatic arthritis treatment. So can you imagine the entire society, entire country or the countries or entire globe will be using that drug, and till they will come to know the side effects or the severe side effects or the mortalities because of death. By the time there will be thousands or maybe the multiple thousands of the death or the permanent disabilities would have happened, right? So it will directly affect the society. If you are conducting a negative research, if you are falsifying the data or fabricating the data, it can affect the society directly, the entire society. Okay, it can affect the entire society. That is the major consequences. Okay, and then the plagiarism is the wrongful appropriation or stealing and publication, stealing the data and publication of another paper or another author's language, thoughts, ideas, or expressions. Okay, plagiarism is not just, you know, copy and pasting. Plagiarism is also stealing the publication or stealing the language, stealing the thoughts, stealing the ideas, or stealing the expressions of any other author. Okay, and then representing them as one's own original work or duplicating one's own publication, self plagiarism, right? So I mean, duplicating the own original work, you are telling that this is your original work but that has been done by someone else. You are taking the whole credit to you. That is the plagiarism. Okay, for any kind of language, thoughts, ideas, expressions, words, publications. Okay, sometimes self plagiarism is also not good. Okay, sometimes self plagiarism is also not good. When you are duplicating your own data again and again in different papers, that is called as self plagiarism. Understand? If you are taking your own data and publishing again and again, that is called as self plagiarism. That is also one of the research misconduct. Understand? That is also one of the research misconduct. So these are the types of common misconducts, common research misconducts that has happened in the research. Okay, that must not be done. Okay, that must not be done, right, guys? Then now there is something called international collaborations in the research. There are many things, but I'm just highlighting few things what they have highlighted, like the types of international collaboration. Okay, types of international collaborations. Okay, so like international collaboration can include all or any of the following involvement, like funding by the international agencies such as UN agencies, NIH, WHO, Wellcome Trust, World Bank, or others. Okay, types of the international collaboration can be any type, the by the fundings or by the academic collaborations, like with the foreign institutions, universities, or organization, and foundations with or without external funding also, and maybe with the formal government can do the inter-country bilateral or multilateral collaborative arrangements between Indian research bodies, institutions, or similar bodies or institutions of the other country, like the Indian government, make the collaborations or arrangements or the MOUs with other countries for a specific type of research, for the specific type of research. So that is important. That is also important. There are multiple types of international collaborations. Okay. Now, this very important thing, what we were talking about yesterday, they also have described, like in the current guidelines for ethical conduction of biomedical research, there are some, there are also the full topic of EC, ethical committee constitution, ethical committee roles and responsibilities. They also talk about sponsor, investigators and all, but those we have discussed yesterday. Now, let me tell you the details of documentation which would be submitted with the ethics review. Okay, so which would be submitted for the ethics review. So this is very important. You all must know what are the documents needed when you are submitting a proposal to the ethics committee, right? What the guidelines says that the documents are needed for the ethics committee review. Okay, so first must be the cover letter to the member secretary. Okay, cover letter to the member secretary. So cover letter must be written, I am doing this research from this department, and this research will have such fundings, this then there are these outcomes, and I'm responsible for the entire team, and this is the research. You must write a cover letter to the member secretary, and like I'm attaching these documents, please review. So you have to write the cover letter to the member secretary. Now my question to all of you here is, ethical committee form is second thing. Yes. So can someone tell me one question here for all of you? Yesterday we discussed about the ethical committee constitution, right? So can someone tell me about the member secretary? So member secretary from which college? Member secretary must be from outside or inside? Yes, guys, tell me. Member secretary from inside or outside? What do you tell me, guys? Inside the institution. Who should be the outside? Who should be the outsider? Who should be the outsider? Chairman, exactly. The chairman must be from the outside and the member secretary must be from the inside, from the affiliated institution. Okay. So first letter is to the chairman. Okay. First letter is to the chairman. Then the type of reviews requested. Type of reviews means whether it is a fresh application. Focus, guys. Fresh application, or whether it is a renewal of ethics approval, or whether it is a resubmission of the documents or resubmission of the application after corrections. You have to write that type of review requested. Okay, then application form for the initial review, then correct version of the informed consent document in English and the different local languages. It must be translated. See, if I'm working in Karnataka right now, I must have the informed consent form and the principal the patient information sheet in English and Kannada or whatever languages are needed. Okay, English and Kannada is mandatory, right? So those things are mandatory. If you are working in West Bengal, the patient information sheet or informed consent form must be there in Bengali and English, okay, or Hindi, whatever is required there. Okay. Then case report form or any kind of questionnaire you're using, then any kind of advertisement or notices that is applicable, if applicable, then patient instruction card or diary only if applicable, right? And any kind, investigators brochure if applicable for drugs, biologics and device trial. Okay, so these things are what is the back translation? See, back translation certificate means like who has done these kind of translations, and if it is sometimes in the ethics committee also, there are the people who don't know the language, right? Who don't know the language. So the back translation certificate tells them that the entire written part is correct in the translated version. Okay, in the translated language also it is perfectly fine. Back translation certificate. Okay, if it is required, if only the ethics committee asks for. Okay, otherwise not required. Then details of the funding agency or sponsor or the funds allocated if applicable. Then brief curriculum vitae, the CVs of all the study researchers, then statement of conflict of interest, if any, then GCP training certificates for all the investigators. Okay, all the investigators in the clinical trials, preferably within 5 years. Now the validity is 2 years. So within 2 years, the GCP certificate must be there. Any other research ethics or other, training evidences, if applicable. Okay, if applicable. Then list of ongoing research studies undertaken by the principal investigator, like under the conflict of interest only. Then undertaking with signatures of investigators. Okay, undertaking form with the signatures of all the investigators must be there. Okay, that's very important. Then regulatory permissions if required, like if you are doing a clinical trial, if you're buying the new investigating drug, or if you're purchasing the new investigator drug, or you are importing anything, so you should have the administrative approvals, institutional committee for research, STEM research cell approval if it is required. And if you have the MOUs with any other collaborative institutes, then you need the MOUs, signed MOUs copies to submit. And then clinical trial agreements between the sponsors, investigators, and head of institution if this is a clinical trial. So these are the major documents needed. Now, the informed consent form. So informed consent form is the major document they have emphasized, because these guidelines are the biomedical research guidelines involving the human participants. So informed consent form is very much mandatory form, where all the information, where all the durations, all the compensations, everything about the clinical trial, all the information which must be needed to the patient or the participant must be there in the informed consent form. Okay, informed consent form. So this is very much mandatory to take the informed consent forms. Can someone tell me what are the types of informed consent forms? What are the types of consents? Yeah, back translation is means if the corrected language, if the language is correct in the different language. I mean, if the English is translated to Bengali, so back translation certificate is required if the Bengali type is matching the English. Okay, Prarchit Devi is telling me the consents are investigator emergency treatment. No, these are not the consents. I'm asking guys, what are the types of consent in the clinical research? Consent in clinical research in CR. Can someone tell me? Patient consent form is written here, yaar. Informed consent form is patient consent form, Harshita. Okay, I'll tell you. So patient consent, I mean the informed consent could be multiple type. Okay. First is, usually previously what they used to do is verbal consent form. Okay. Verbal consent, not form. I'm not talking about the form here. Verbal consent. Then audio consent. Audio consent will come later, definitely, but for paper consent form, I mean the paper form. Okay. The print form. Okay. Consent. Print version. Okay. And then video consenting. Video consenting. Then audio video consenting. Okay. Audio video consenting. These are the different types of consenting. So verbal consent, there are the verbal consent is still required. There is no need of the print form or video consent or audio consent in such cases where you need to engage the community. Okay. Where you need to engage the community, you just need the verbal consent from the group or group head or the panchayat head or something. So you can go ahead with such studies like verbal consent. Okay. Audio consent is when the audio of the person is required, saying that I am willing to participate in such clinical trial, and I understood all the facts, and I was, like trained, or I was told everything about the clinical trial by the principal investigator. That's why I'm involved in this clinical trial, and I'm involving, and I'm, getting recruited. So audio consent form, paper consent form, you all are using. You must have seen that there is the patient consent form, informed consent form, and that will be signed by the participant and investigator duly. That will be signed. The print form, then the video. So the patient will be giving the consent in front of the camera. the consent will be recorded with the face, with the full face of the patient or participant. The consent will be recorded, because sometimes the paper consents are not taken properly. Sometimes paper consents are not the actual consent forms, so somebody else has signed those, right? It has happened usually. It has happened, it happens usually in the clinical trials. So video consent is important in case of major clinical trials and all. Then audio video is also, required. Sometimes audio video clinical trials are, required. Okay. So I hope you understood the types of informed consents. Now, what must be the content in the information, informed consent forms? So the informed consent form must include the following: statement mentioning that it is a research. Okay, what we are doing, why we are taking the consent is for the research. Purpose and the method of the research in the simple language must be written. Expected duration of the research must be written. Benefit to the participant community and might reasonably will be expected as an outcome of the research must be written in the informed consent form, like why you are participating. As someone asked me what the people get, so we have to write the benefits of the participants community, in the consent form. And then any foreseeable risk, discomfort or inconvenience to the participant resulting from the participation in the study, that must be written in the informed consent form. Okay. Extent to which confidentiality of the records could be maintained, such as limits of which researcher would be able to safeguard confidentiality, must be written in the informed consent form. Like the name will be anonymous, phone number will be anonymous, email will be anonymous, this data will be anonymous. That entire details must be written in the informed consent form. Then about the payments and reimbursement, like as I told, travel reimbursement or food reimbursement or the daily basis reimbursement must be written in the informed consent form. Then free treatment or compensation, like the ancillary care, right? The care, ancillary care must be, written in the informed consent form. Or any, and the definitely it is very important, freedom of the individual to participate and withdraw from the research at any time without penalty or without loss of benefits to which the participant would otherwise be entitled. you know so the major part is it should be written that you are free to exit any time from the clinical trial without any responsibility. Then the last thing, identify of the research team and contact person with the address and phone numbers must be written there for the emergency contacts. Okay, the emergency contacts and the helpline number must be given to check or to report the violation of the ethical principles for human rights. Okay, so these are the major parts of the informed consent. If you are preparing any kind of informed consent, you should follow these. You should understand these, what you have to write. You have to write the statement that it is research, purpose, expected duration, benefits, foreseeable risk, and about the confidentiality, payment, reimbursement, free treatment, freedom of exiting, and about one contact number and one helpline number, like to appeal against the violation of ethical principles and human rights. This is the common informed consent components. Okay. Now, next thing is, now major question for all of you. And many people ask me this question. Okay. Many people ask me this question, where we can waiver the consent form, where we can waiver the informed consent form. So can someone tell me where we can waiver, where we don't need or it's not necessary to take the informed consent form? Can someone tell me? Yes, guys. Yes, tell me where we don't need the ethics, the informed consent form. Case studies. Mohit, case studies, beta, we need the informed consent. We need the consent form. It is mandatory to take the consent form. It is not mandatory to take the ethical approval in case studies, Mohit. It is mandatory to take the patient consent form in the case studies. We don't need the ethics approval in studies, in case studies. Okay. Yeah. In case report, again, Aftab, we don't need the ethical approval. Why you guys are confused? Ethical approval is not required in government informed consent, I'm telling. Community cases, no harm to the patient. Okay, let me tell you. Let me tell you. Again, retrospective studies, yes, we don't need the informed consent in retrospective studies. Yes. So, EC may grant consent waiver in following situations. Okay. In the following situations. What are these following situations? Research cannot practically be carried out or without the waiver, and the waiver is significantly justified. So, research cannot be practically carried out without the waiver. Okay. Then retrospective studies is the first thing. Definitely in the retrospective studies, we don't need the consent form. Okay. Research on anonymized biological samples or data. So anonymized biological data or biological samples. Okay. Biological data or biological samples, not anonymized human beings. Understand? Someone was telling me in my last class of clinical research, like I was talking about the informed consent. They were telling like, if we are anonymizing the data, why we need the informed consent or the ethics committee? Because we are not informing anyone about the patient. But we need the ethics committee approval wherever we are involving the human beings. Okay, it is mandatory. But the consent form we don't need in the retrospective studies. And if we are just using the biological samples, if we are using the biological samples of anonymized research, anonymized data. See, anonymized data means like not from the patient directly, but some research center, they are preserving the cell lines, they are preserving the stem cells, they are preserving the urine, they are preserving the heart cells or anything, whatever we are taking from the third party, and they have the anonymity of the data, they are maintaining the anonymity of the data. In such cases, we don't need the informed consent form because we are taking the biological samples or the data from some other party. Okay. Then certain types of public health studies or surveillance programs or programs evaluation studies, we don't need. Research on the data available in public domain like NIH and all, we don't need the informed consent form. If you are taking the data from any registry, any public registry in India, you don't need the the informed consent form. Then research during the humanitarian emergencies or disasters when the participation may not be a position to give the consent, that in such situations also we can waiver the informed consent form. Okay, but it totally depends on the ethics committee. Remember this, it totally depends on the ethics committee. Okay. Now, vulnerability. What is vulnerability? When we take any individual or participant which is vulnerable. Vulnerable means special or like not common. Vulnerable means actually here in the clinical research is not common. Okay. Not common means like the pregnant women. Pregnant women participating in the clinical trial is not common. Children participating in the clinical trial is not. Army men participating in that, disabled patients, not is a vulnerable population, bank employee, the police employees, police professionals. So any specific group which is not common, okay, if they are participating in the study, that is called as vulnerable population. This is called as vulnerable population. Sir, if we want to make a registry for particular disease, what all permissions we need? You need ethics committee approval. And if it is prospective, then you need the consent forms also. Okay. Mohammed Jaid. So individuals may be considered to vulnerability. So first is, as I was telling, socially, economically, or politically disadvantaged people who are susceptible to being exploited. Okay. Like some people who are incapable of making a voluntarily informed decision themselves, like what? For example, people who are unconscious or differently abled. They are not able to make the decisions. So they are vulnerable people. The people socially, economically, or politically disadvantaged are vulnerable people, like tribals and all, right? Economically, socially, politically disadvantaged are tribals and all. Like, and then the people who are able to give consent, but whose voluntariness or understandings is completely compromised due to situational conditions or the disease, like if they are terminally ill or if they are mentally ill, mentally sick. So these things are very, very important for the vulnerability. Okay. And then like the people from like unemployed individuals are socially disadvantaged. Economically and socially disadvantaged are unemployed people and people from LGBTQ community, pregnant, tribals and all, right? Then unduly influenced either by the expectations of benefit or fear of retaliation in case of refusal to participate, such as the refugees and all, such as the refugees, they are like, they are having the benefit or fear of retaliation. So in such cases, they are vulnerable and they cannot be taken, the part in any kind of clinical trial without consent. Children up to 18 years, women in special situations like tribals and marginalized communities, then refugees, migrants, homeless people, persons or populations in conflict zones, riot areas or disaster situation, afflicted with mental illness or cognitive impaired individuals, suffering from stigmatizing or rare disease, or the institutional individuals under the trials and prisoners. These all are the people are vulnerable people. And we have the specific concerns and clauses for the participation of vulnerable people into the trials. So these guidelines are also covering the vulnerability and what kind of, clinical decisions you should take and what kind of participation you should do, you should give to such participants, right? Then now clinical trial conduction, I'll not go much, you can read it. Phase one, there are 4 phases. Phase 0, phase 0 is the study of exploratory study, right, for the new investigational drugs in, investigational new drugs, right? And these are the part of regulatory studies, and these involves a very limited human exposure, right? Has no therapeutic or diagnostic intents. So like this is the phase 0, where only a few very few people are, like the very less human exposure is there. Okay. Then the phase 1, I mean, you can read those phase 1 and all, you also all know, right? So phase 1 is estimation of the initial safety and tolerability and pharmacokinetics. And then phase 2 about the dosings, right? Phase 2 is about the dosings, the dose response, confirming to the dose response and all, right? Autoimmunity in the case of vaccines and all. So phase 2 trials are for that, right? And phase 3 clinical trials are actually for efficacy, right? Efficiency of any drug and vaccine are, done in the phase 3, right? And then phase 4 are what? Phase 4 are for post-marketing drugs, post-marketing surveys, phase 4 clinical trials, and outcome research and registries. These are the phase 4 clinical trials. I mean, phase 4, drug trials, right? Then where the placebo used, like placebo. How many of you can tell me what is the placebo? We'll close the class in 5-7 minutes, guys. Please tell me what is the placebo. What is the placebo? Tell me. Without API. Yes, without API, without active pharmaceutical ingredient, without active pharmaceutical ingredient, right? So there is no active ingredient, but this gives the feelings, this gives the feeling of ingredient or the drug to the participants. Okay. So if there is no effective therapy available, if there is no effective therapy available, like you don't have any comparator drug, okay, so in such cases we give placebo, where withholding an established effective therapy would be not exposing to participants. We cannot expose the another drug to the participant just to compare, because it can harm the participant. So in such cases we give the placebo. Where disease is self-limited means there is no other treatment available. The use of an established effective therapy as a comparator would not yield in significantly reliable results. In such cases also we need the placebo. You can read more of the things. You can read more of the things in like how to use placebo and where to use placebo. Okay. Then now they also have talked about the medical devices and clinical trials, right? Medical devices and clinical trials. So you can read those. I'll share the, the things with you. So the medical devices are classified into 4 types. Okay. And based on that, only the clinical trials are, divided into different types. But the major classes of the medical devices are 4. Class A, where the medical devices are low risk. Class B, where the medical devices are having low moderate risk, where the class C says about the moderate high risk, and class D, where there are high risk medical devices and clinical trials on the medical devices. So if we talk about class A medical devices, what are class A medical devices? Class A medical devices are like absorbent cotton wools, surgical dressing, alcohol swabs. These are the low risk medical devices, right? You don't need, I mean, the patient does not have any kind of specific clinical trials, clinical trial risk or the risk from the medical devices. Class B, thermometer, BP monitoring device, disinfectants. So there is a very low risk, but moderate risk. If suppose thermometer is broken in the mouth, then entire mercury will be in the mouth and it can cause the severe side effects. Okay. Then class C, moderate high risk, like implants, hemodialysis, catheters and all. Class D, like the inside implants like heart valves, angiographic wires, angiographic stents and all. These are the high risk class D. Okay, guys. So you can read more about these things, but these are the medical devices and their classes on the risk basis. Okay, on the risk basis, right? So these guidelines are also talking about the medical devices and the clinical trials related to those medical devices, right? Now my question to you is, now my question to you is, you know, this is Gandhi ji ka chasma. Okay. This is Gandhi ji ka chasma with lenses, not without lenses, with lenses. Guys, can you tell me if this is a medical device or not? Is this a medical device? The eye wear. Is it? Oh my God, my audience is very clever. They know. Okay, so yes, the eyewear with the lenses, if you are wearing with the lenses, okay, if you are wearing it for the eyesight, any type of eyesight, that is medical device. Okay, your eyewear, earwear, your hearing aids, everything is a medical device. Okay, everything is a medical device. So you can read more in the guidelines about that, right? So then public health studies. Public health studies are different types of public health studies, like which are between the state and the policies for the policy making, right? For the policy making. So class 1 medical device, yes. So these are the medical devices, definitely. And the public health studies are being done with some goals and aspects. So those goals are like to study the scientifically sound and linked between the achievement of public health goals, like the policy making and all. If applicable, it should respect, it is the respect for the community applied through the community engagements. So the methodology must be appropriate for that. The segments of the segments of the population must be linked and must be beneficiaries, like the social justice I was talking about, the equivalent justice, right? So there are multiple things. Type of consent in the public health, like as I was telling, verbal or oral consents are more than enough. Sometimes broad consents, like taken from the sarpanch, taken from the leader, taken from the block pramukh and all, are sufficient in that. Group consent is required. Cluster, when we do the cluster randomized clinical trials, group consent is okay with that. Okay, so in public health studies, there is, I mean, sometimes it is required to get the individual consent forms, but sometimes broad and group consent forms are more than enough. Okay, so these are the major things in these guidelines. Let me show you the guidelines, guys, once, so you can see this. I hope the PDF is visible to all of you. Is the PDF visible, guys? Okay, great. These are the guidelines what we studied today. National Ethical Guidelines for Biomedical and Health Research Involving Human Participants. Involving human participants, 2017, right? 2017, by Indian Council of Medical Research, ICMR, right? By the ICMR. So these are the sections. See, these are beautiful guidelines. If you read those now, these are beautiful guidelines. There are, first section says about the general principles. Then the second section talks about the ethical issues, as I told, right? Ethical issues, benefit risk assessment, informed consent process, privacy and confidentiality, distributive justice, compensation, payment of the participants, payment for the participation, conflict of interest, ancillary care. These are talking about everything, post-research access and all. And then, the section 3 talks about responsibility conduct of the research, responsible conduct of the research, what we talked about, like policies, reviewing, reporting, authorship, publications, clinical trial registry of India, collaborative research, research misconduct. I mean, it talks about everything. Okay. Then ethical review procedures are there, and then vulnerability they talks about in section 6. Section 7 talks about the clinical trials for drug and other interventions, general guidelines and all. Then section 8 talks about the public health research. Section 9 talks about the social and behavioral science research for health. Then Section 10 is totally up to, the human genetics testing and research. They are the guidelines for human genetics testing and research. Then biological materials, biobanking and databases are there in the Section 11. Section 12 is talking about research during humanitarian emergencies and disasters, right? And then list of references, and there are annexures you can check out. So here there are, all the messages from our health minister, Jagat Prakash Nadda, and then, our, secretary of the government of India, and then the director of Medical Council of India, president of Medical Council of India, NMC, and then there's the introduction, and then they start with the sections, statement of general principles, and see, you will see general ethical issues. There are the issues. These are the general ethical issues, like there are all the general ethical issues, right? The harms, category of harms they have given, privacy and confidentiality, the payment of participation and all. So in this, they have given the summaries also. Okay. In these guidelines, they have given the summaries also. You will see the beautiful summaries. Responsible conduct of research. See, they have given the summaries also, like, see, identifying, mitigating, and managing the conflict of interests. Okay. You will see here research requiring authorization prior to data collection. Okay. You will see the criteria for authorship here. I mean, they talked about a lot. See, they talked about here. They talked about reviewing and reporting the research, like publications, responsible authorship, research misconducts. They talked about everything, whatever we studied here. Okay, whatever I have told you, everything is, taken from these guidelines. I have talked about these guidelines only. See, like, whatever the documents to be submitted to the ethics committee review, and what are the detailed documentation to be included in the protocol, that I did not teach you, but you can read about those things here, like the face page, brief summary, background, justification, inclusion, exclusion criteria, clear research, clear objectives and areas, eligibility criterias, all everything, types of reviews, right? They have given these thoroughly. There are 187 pages, and they have given everything. Types of decision by EC: approved, not approved, revisions with minor modifications, revisions with major modifications, not approved, rejected. So they are very clear. There are very clear guidelines about the conduction of entire research, and about informed consent process. About informed consent process. Okay. Vulnerability. There is a separate section on the vulnerability. If you check who should be the vulnerable people, like economically challenged, the persons below poverty line, ethical minorities, sexual minorities like lesbians, gay, bisexual, transgender. So India has the comprehensive guidelines, guys. That's why it is mandatory to read these guidelines before conducting the research. Okay. Obligations for all the stakeholders they have given here, right? So if you check all these clinical trials for drugs and other interventions, they have given these wonderful guidelines. Okay. They have given these wonderful classification of drugs under IUS also. They have given the classification of drugs and formulations under IUS, and guidelines for that, guidelines for contraceptives, guidelines for clinical trials in pregnancy, guidelines for clinical trials in oncology, guidelines for clinical trials in, using the new technology. Everything is written perfectly here. Public health guidelines, public health research. So if you go through and read one by one, these are really fantastic, and if you read these guidelines, these are really amazing read. Human genetic testing and research. So they have the clear cut message and clear cut things for such participations and all. Everything you will get in these guidelines, I'll share. So today I made all the presentation out of these guidelines. List of references are there. You will see list of references, abbreviations you will see from starting. You will see the abbreviations also at the end. Glossary about the definitions. Okay. So you are going to get everything. Standard operating procedures, list of SOPs, right? List of SOPs, the people who participated in making these guidelines. So you must read these guidelines, guys. You must read these guidelines. So with that, we will, close this today's session. Guys, thank you very much. If you have any questions, please ask me. Can someone share the form? Can you share the form? One sec. One sec.